Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Suzanne Lamb, and I am the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition Program and Events Director. Happy to bring this workshop with you today. We're doing something different, if you're noticing all this technology. This is a workshop that we're doing in person and online. So although you don't hear the speaker right now, it's actually being broadcast is the word I'm looking for, to the internet, to our folks who are online. So welcome. Just a couple housekeeping things. Online folks, you have the option to ask a question in your chat box there on your control panel. Please feel free to type in the questions throughout the webinar. We will be answering these questions at the end of the webinar, just so that things will move a little bit smoothly. Other than that, we're excited to put this program on for you today. We do have a recording of this webinar if you want to go back and hear something that Steve said, which is very important, I'm sure. So we'll have that available to you, hopefully by the end of this day, if not early next week. You have my contact information if you need anything, and now I'll pass it over to Ms. Carly Dirks.
Good morning, everyone. I am the Procurement Counselor and Program Manager for the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition. I'm going to hand it over to the other gentlemen who are speaking today. They're going to introduce themselves so you know who they are and how knowledgeable they are on this subject matter before you start diving in too far. And then I'm going to introduce what PNDC and GCAP do for you guys in our community. So Steve?
Okay. My name is Steve Spilker. I got to walk this way. All right, get over into the camera. This is going to be a really interesting situation. Okay. My name is Steve Spilker. I'm with the Government Contract Assistance Program, and I will be the main presenter today in regards to how to market your GSA contract. Just very quickly on my background, I used to be a consultant doing GSA contracts, 8A certifications, and so on and so forth for my own company in Southern California for a number of years. And for the last 5 years, I've been working with GCAP basically in that same situation, helping firms put proposals together, do their negotiations, and then also work with them after post-award. I'd like to introduce Carol Bernard, who will also be a co-presenter.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Carol Bernard. I know most of you guys here know me, but I am former officer in the Navy, supply officer, worked for the City of Vancouver in their procurement department, Department of Veterans Affairs, contracting, and then I've been here, SBA, and then I've been with GCAP for 3 years, and I'll talk a little bit about the market research component and how to go about doing that, because it's a very important element to direct your efforts in your GSA pursuits. I also want to let Jim Rivera introduce himself. He's one of my counterparts here in Portland. So, Jim.
Thank you, Carol. Hi, I'm Jim Rivera. I'm also a GCAP, Government Contract Assistance Program member, and my background is that I've run two successful services business, just doing federal contracting with the federal government, and my experience is from marketing, from bringing a small business up to larger businesses, from proposals to operations to things. I'm going to be speaking very briefly about the benefits of teaming and how that can increase your capacity and increase your reach within the marketplace. Carly? Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Let's begin. Now that you know your cast, who's putting it on today? So PNDC. PNDC is the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition. We are a security and defense industry trade association. So our members range across the supply chain from primes down to about third tier, and the sustaining members like law firms and PR firms that support the supply chain. We put on a lot of networking events for our members, and then also reach out to government officials to help get out our message and make sure that the industry leaders are well represented. We also put together training events such as today, and then help businesses with ITAR, ISO, and other certification programs. The other organization today is GCAP, GCAP Government Contract Assistance Program. In other states, you'll hear it called a PTAC. It's the same thing. We're just unique in Oregon. We call it something a little different. So the Procurement Technical Assistance centers is what you'll hear it referred to in other states. But again, we put on a lot of robust training opportunities. We go out in the field. These gentlemen and myself, we figure out what do businesses need to know to be successful in the government marketplace. We put together those trainings. We meet one-on-one, provide free counseling. We'll come out, talk to you about your certifications. How do I get on the system for award management? Do I need to be on the system for award management? And really help you with that successful future in government contracting. Other than that, we have the Northwest Connectory, which is a free buyer-supplier network, and that is hosted by and managed by PNDC. So if you have questions about that, please let me know. If you have any questions after the presentation about PNDC, about GCAP, how you can join, how you can really maximize your membership, please let me know or reach out to any of these gentlemen and they can help you out. So Steve?
Purpose of this class is twofold. First, generally to educate you into the ways of putting together a sales and marketing plan for your General Service Administration Federal Supply Schedule. And secondly, and probably most importantly, to entice you to want to know more about how to do that procedure or process and how to make it more effective specifically for your company. Now, we're putting together a 3-hour class today that we're going to have condensed into an hour and a half because of time constraints. As a result, we're going to kind of go through this thing fairly quickly, but I am going to welcome questions from you. I would ask if you could to maybe have those questions framed generally so that they can help everyone here as opposed to just maybe a question about your widgets that you're selling specifically. But I definitely want questions both from the online people as well as yourselves. That's the best way for us to really show you the very specific ways that a plan will help you facilitate sales within your sales and marketing plan. If I don't get to all of your questions here during the hour and a half, I will, I promise you, afterwards or on one-on-ones. I really welcome the opportunity to meet with each and every one of you at a time after this particular presentation to work with you to assist you in obtaining sales on your GSA contract. I'm going to read one thing for you that, and I don't usually read anything when I give a presentation. I'm a little bit animated, and I'll apologize for the advance. So if I wander around the room, that's the way I would do it. But I will read this. It was written by a very, very wise person. Let you guess who it was? A number of years ago, and it's still effective today. Effective selling and marketing of your GSA FSS contract is an art, not a science. Understand that. Remember that. Let it sink in. Yes, there's basic steps that must be taken, and depending on the outcome of each of these, the next steps are programmed subsequently one after another. However, unlike the steps taken to put together your proposal and negotiate your end contract, the process for a successful return on your investment of this tool, it's a tool. Don't think of it as a contract. Think of it as a tool. Is much more creative than structured. If you're looking for a one-formula-fits-all way to sell via GSA FSS contract, you're going to be disappointed. There are over 20 million different items and services on GSA's FSS and VA's FSS schedules. With both products and services offered on same, one approach will not fit all. There will be experimentation, action, reset, repeat on a continual basis. There are many, many different ways to sell and market your GSA Federal Supply Schedule. Because each of your firm's products, services, customer support, competition, pricing, etc. is different, you're going to have to customize the way you go to market. Now for the encouraging news. There are basic steps taken by most, if not all, of the successful vendors on GSA, and we will review each of them today. Some will apply to products only, some to services only, some to both. It will be up to you and the support of organizations like GCAP, PNDC, and others to assist you in going down this long, winding road to GSA success. And that's the last thing I'm going to read today. But I am going to ask you a couple of questions before we get started. How many of you provide products versus services? Products, raise your hands. How many services? Okay, almost evenly divided. Not sure about online yet, but we'll get that information. Trick question, but very pertinent. How many of you have a written sales and marketing plan that at least has a function, has the GSA schedule in there as part of it? Raise your hands. 2 here in this audience. How many do we show online? Anybody? Okay, they're shy. How many of you have a VA, Federal Supply Schedule? You're selling products specifically to the Veterans Administration. Okay, interesting. All right, let's go over a couple basics here before we get into the marketing. The post-award and contract management, you've got your contract, you've got your letter. You can start, if you have just gotten your contract, you can start selling right away, even before you upload everything onto GSA Advantage and before you upload your terms and conditions in your contract. You can start marketing, as I mentioned. Contract responsibilities, remember that you're going to have to do your IFF fee on a regular basis, on a quarterly basis. You're going to be having annual sales meetings to go over how your contract, that you stayed within the context of your contract, etc. You maintain compliance with the federal regulations and so on and so forth. Remember that this is a base contract for 5 years with 3 5-year options afterwards. First and foremost, know the players that are involved in your GSA contract. If you are not familiar with your PCO, your ACO, and your IOA, get familiar with them. They can either be very, very helpful or they can be very, very unhelpful in you learning more about your contract and the effectiveness of it while you have it during the first 5 years. Your PCO is your main contact. I'm going to be very honest with you. I have seen some excellent PCOs, and I have seen some terrible PCOs. Hopefully, you will be fortunate enough to get a good one. If you don't, you're going to have to take it upon yourself to develop a relationship with someone that is probably not wanting to make much of a relationship with you. It's very important to do that. I'd like to talk to each of you if you're having any difficulties with your PCO, and I'm seeing smiles already. Talk to me. I can't guarantee you that we can improve that relationship, but there are ways of doing it. A lot of it has to do with sugar. I'll just leave it at that particular point. Your administrative contracting officer is someone that's basically just going to make sure that you're doing your IFF fees on a regular basis and that you're staying, in a sense, staying within compliance on the regular scheduled things that you do within the contract. Not as important as your PCO, but still an important person to know. Industrial operations analyst is the person that's basically going to be coming out on an annual basis, assuming that they come out and see you on an annual basis, to ensure that you are staying within the context of the negotiated pricing formula that you put together with your contract. This is kind of an interesting person. He or she is out there talking to many, many companies. I would always recommend that when they come out, and assuming that you stay within compliance on your contract, ask them, how are things going with other GSA contract holders, especially in the area, and especially if they're in your industry. These guys, you'd be really surprised at how talkative they can be about what's going on at GSA and what's going on with other companies staying within compliance. So again, if you're in the sales and marketing side, and I hope that most of you are here, then use those charms that you use out there with your customers with the internal people at GSA. I know at times it seems like that they're more adversarial than they're helpful, but the honest to God's truth is they can be extremely helpful to you. So the relationship with them is imperative. Next, Schedule Z library. What's a library? It's a location of knowledge. And for you as a contract holder, it's an online source for the most up-to-date information on your schedule and your sins that you have within your contract. It's a market research tool for both you and your customers. Within the library, potential customers can find you. You can also find out information about your competition, contracts that they've had, competition, potential team members that you may want to team with if you're a service company. Within the schedule or within the library, you can find those particular customers. Very, very important. The e-library is tied to your SAM. Keep your SAM information up to date, including your dynamic small business profile. Show of hands, everybody who has kept their dynamic small business profile up to date. Again, looks like half. I highly recommend that you keep that profile up to date. If you get a project, you get a contract, put it in the profile. Why? Because contracting officers look at that profile. And especially if you're a services company, it allows them to see what you're doing most recently in the government marketplace. It also is imperative that if you don't keep your SAM up to date, well, the chances of getting the contract become slim and none, even within GSA. GSA Advantage, I'm sure everybody knows what GSA Advantage is. That's the e-commerce site where contracting officers can obtain your products, they can shop, they can order, and so on and so forth. Again, research. You're going to hear that word multiple times, which is why we have the expert Carol Bernard here today, who's going to spend a great deal of time talking about it. I regard research as an ongoing process. You will note that on almost every single tool that we're talking about, there is an option to do research, either the buyers researching who you are, what you sell, etc., or for you to find out who's buying what you sell. Now, it's not because GSA is not very bright and they put research capability in every one of their tools. What they're telling you is that it's imperative that you keep your finger on what's happening within your schedule, within your SINs, within your pricing, within your competition. They're giving you multiple tools to do that. If you go through the full year of having your GSA schedule and you have not done any updated research on competition, pricing, contracting officers, or the agencies with which they work, on an annual basis, if you're not just doing that, maybe once a year or once every couple of years, you're doing yourself an injustice, because contracting officers are changing everywhere. And GSA schedules and the descriptions of their SINs change fairly regularly. So it's important for you to know about that. You can compare features, prices, delivery of your competition, etc. I don't know about you, but I'm from the private side and had my own company, aerospace company, for a number of years, and my competition seemed like they changed every hour. So it was really important for me to know what was happening out in the marketplace. And it's imperative that you know that too. GSA FSS is not some type of, I'll say, stagnant tool. It is evolving continually. In fact, I'm on a national task force where we're looking at the service contracts right now. There's going to be some pretty major changes coming down the pike on service schedule contracts. So if you're not looking at things such as the GSA e-library and so on and so forth, you may not be aware of that. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about that down the road. Contractors can use GSA Advantage for researching competition, we said. Also, this is kind of important. We'll talk a little bit more about this. A lot of people who sell products aren't aware that you can run a sale on GSA Advantage. And you can put an icon on there saying that you're running a sale on GSA Advantage. How many of you provide a link on your items, if you're selling products, a link in your description of your product to your website? You should be doing that. Unless you can describe everything about your company and your product in the 250 some odd characters that you have for each item that you can put on GSA Advantage, then you should be having it linked to your website so that you can inform the contracting officer more about your product and service. That's important. Piquing the customer's interest. Utilize images, photos, logos. Have you guys been on GSA Advantage lately? I don't want to sound like I'm doing a stand-up routine here, but I got to tell you, I have never seen more miserable marketing and promotion of items like I've seen on GSA Advantage. I've seen people selling things like vehicles. There's not a picture of it. And the description is lift truck. Wow. Boy, that really told a contracting officer what you got there. No pictures, no description, no comparisons. I mean, if you run out of the or you get all those characters to describe what you're selling and how you sell it, and you're not using all those characters, it's like running an ad in a magazine and only saying, hey, my company is Acme Company and we sell lift trucks. But you're leaving the rest of the back of the page of the magazine completely open. Why would you do that? Utilize all of the source of GSA Advantage. Put photos in there. Put logos in there. List all applicable quality capabilities, or if you've got any green certifications, put those in there. Write detailed product descriptions. You know what? Let's say your product description just goes 200 characters and you just can't put anything more in there. Put the names of your competition in there at the very bottom of the description. You go, why would I do that? Well, what happens if a contracting officer is doing a search in GSA Advantage and they're putting in your competition's name? Wouldn't you like it to pop up? A little trick of the trade there. I mean, you got the characters, use them. That's what it's there for. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to do that. Yes, sir.
So when they type into search in GSA, the only thing that those search engine optimization words are pulling from is the product description?
Not the only thing, but that's part of them. Yep. Repeat the question. Okay. The question was, is that the only place that GSA's search engine searches? And the answer is no. It will also search the PDF term and condition document. If you're a service company and or you're a product provider, it will search in there. It will search, right, okay, but that's one of them. But the primary one is, especially if it's a product, is going to be the item that's on GSA Advantage. Time-wise, okay, going to speed this up. eBuy. I mentioned before, how many of you are looking at eBuy? I like this tool more than I like any of them on here, and this is why. It's easy for you to go ahead and use it. It's essential when you open up your computer and up comes Outlook or some other software that you're always looking at, your calendar, etc. eBuy should be the same thing for you. And why is that? Because you are going to see on there requests for information, requests for quotes, requests for proposals for products and services within your schedule. And there may even be within your SINs, and they may not be products or services that you're going to provide. They're exactly what you're there, that you're providing, but it's going to be common to what you're doing if it's within your SIN. And guess what you're going to see? You're going to see the name of the contracting officer that's looking for that product or service. What does that mean to you? It means a contracting officer has experience buying products or services within your schedule, within your SIN. Even if you're not bidding it, I would be getting that name of that contracting officer and that contact information, and I would be putting it into my FedCO database. How many of you have a FedCO database? How can you not have a FedCO database within GSA? I mean, how many people say, I can't find the right federal contracting officer? GSA is giving you that information in eBuy. So again, there's a source for you to start developing a list by location, by command, by agency, what have you, of contracting officers that for whatever reason might be the expert within their command or their agency to buy that kind of product or service, or it may just be coincidental that they've been assigned the requisitions come across their desk and they're just buying it because they have to. But at least they're going to have some experience within your schedule and your SIN. It's important for you to know who those people are. I think I've talked a little bit about this, access to RFQs and RFPs. For service companies, within your SIN, perhaps an RFP comes up, or an RFQ comes up, and it's not exactly in your wheelhouse, bid it anyway. If you've got the time, you have the capability. Why? You get the experience. You get a CO seeing who you are, especially if it's in a local area in here. And we're going to talk about local versus national here in a few minutes. You can elect to receive email notices of any opportunity within eBuy, or excuse me, yeah, within your schedule, within your SIN. Talked about reviewing the site all the time for contacts, etc. Access to the real customer points, as I mentioned. I cannot emphasize more that if you are not putting together a federal CO/specifier database, you are doing yourself a huge injustice. How many of you have tried to send out mass emails? That's okay. You can admit that you did. And you probably didn't have a very good return on that. And you've probably been approached by a number of companies that are promising to sell you the list of all those contracting officers to get you to nirvana world as far as sales and marketing is concerned. That's not going to work. It's really important that you're contacting the COs that have experience in buying your products and services. Some more than others. When it comes to services, I really like that database. When it comes to products, as I said, that could be just because the requisitions come across their desk. But when it comes to services, usually if it's working, if they're seeing that CO, you're going to see that CO probably on a repetitive basis because he or she is doing that kind of work within their agency on a repetitive basis. Reverse auctions. I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that FedBid that's been out there as was taking a lot of GSA business away, and FedBid is now sort of been ratcheted back. There's I'll say that they are the government is taking a look at them on how they do their business, and as a result we're going to see more GSA reverse auctions coming down the pike. At least that's what GSA is saying. How many of you have participated in a GSA reverse auction? All righty then. Okay, well, it's not your fault. It could be because you haven't seen a whole lot in GSA. There's been more in FedBid than there has been on GSA. But understand that that's a tool that I would recommend that you look at if you sell products. Vendor Support Center. I think most of you are probably somewhat familiar with that. If you uploaded using your SIP software, which of course you would have done, and if you didn't know how to do it exactly, you probably use the Vendor Support Center to assist you in uploading information onto GSA Advantage. Well, there's more to them than just that. There are ways to, they can provide input on best ways to describe and promote your products. You should be asking them that. They're responsible for the SIP software. They're responsible for maintaining GSA Advantage, so you should be talking to those people when you can. And interestingly enough, it's one of the few departments within GSA where the phone is actually answered by a human being and one of the people that actually can assist you. It's not just a administrative person that's going to put you on hold. So utilize their skills and capabilities where you can. They also, in relation with GSA Interact, will put together webinars and seminars, etc., and provide you some background and experience on how best to use the MAS system. One of the things kind of important, but I see maybe 10% of the companies that I work with, probably not really a quality GSA MSA partner because they don't do all the things that they should be doing. Did I mention research? Okay, we're going to come to that again. Create and then continue to develop your sales and marketing plan. I'm going to emphasize that over and over and over again. Most small businesses say, I don't have time to put a plan together. Even large businesses sometimes say that. And as a result, they're almost doomed to do the same things in a little bit different ways over and over again that didn't work for them. And they're wondering why they're no better off year after year after year than they were before because they didn't follow a plan and then they didn't evaluate the results of those plans at the end of the year to see what worked and what didn't work. Market your company to targeted government customers. Create, distribute, and update your price list. We're going to go through all these things, but I'm just trying to just generally say that if you're not doing these things, you're not really giving yourself the advantage of becoming a quality GSA vendor. Targeted companies. I see many, many, many companies that will go out there and say, you know what? I can sell my widgets to anybody. And so immediately they start saying that my target customer is, for instance, Department of Defense. Well, there's a very narrow target. I mean, gosh, there can't be, what, more than 400 and some odd bases, numerous agencies and so on and so forth. So they're out there saying, if anyone talks to me or if I can talk to anybody in the DOD, I will talk to them. And if you're a small business, good luck on that one. I'm sure you have all the resources in the world to be able to talk to basically everybody in the DOD. We talked about reporting sales and remitting the industrial funding fee. That's important. You got to do that. Make sure you stay in compliance with the Trade Agreement Act. Use the available training sources provided by GSA, and again, prepare for your audit on a regular basis. That's just kind of a general background. If you're not doing all of that, again, I don't really feel, in my considered opinion, that you're a quality partner. I talked about research a little bit. I'm going to ask if Carol will come up here for a couple minutes and talk specifically about this. But I want to reiterate before he starts talking that research should be ongoing all of the time that you have a GSA contract, because of the things I've talked about. The schedule's changing, the SINs are changing, the contracting officers are changing, your competition is changing. So if you're not keeping up to date with what's going on within every aspect that we just talked about, then you're going to fall behind. Because trust me, there is a competitor or competitors that are keeping up to date on the research.
All righty. Well, thanks, Steve. And you answered the question that I was going to ask. When should research be done? And as Steve mentioned, ongoing research is what's needed. In fact, when you're first getting into the federal market or you're first looking at the federal market, that's the first place that you're going to go and say, does the government buy what I sell before I even start this endeavor? Once you're able to answer that question, then basically then you would go back and revisit the research and say, who is buying what you sell, how much are they spending, where did they buy it from, current trends, etc. We work with a number of clients that oftentimes they might have gone into GSA schedule and didn't do the research ahead of time, and now they're like, how do we sell our products? Well, after we do the research, we say the government's not really buying from that contract vehicle. Perhaps they're buying from another contract vehicle, and a lot of times we can analyze and see that in the data. So where do we go to do that? USAspending.gov is a great database to go and do that historical market research. This database was actually created as part of the Federal Transparency and Accountability Act of 2006 as a way of keeping our representatives in check and have some transparency of the spending. But it makes for a great market research tool because, as I was mentioning, when we sit down and we do the research and we go through the database and we see where the buying is occurring, we see that, okay, we can verify that there is spend going through GSA schedules. Or we could say, well, maybe there's a Navy contract that probably 80% of the time they're going directly through that contract before they're even going to GSA schedules. Or maybe sometimes we see a pretty even distribution between an agency contract, a GSA buy, and an open market transaction. So that's what helps you not only understand where that buying is, but at each of those contract vehicle levels, you would develop a different strategy to market yourself within those. Another good website that you can go to is FedBizOps. You probably know FedBizOps as the place where they post all the solicitations. And that's in fact what it is. That's the place where they post open market solicitations over $25,000. So most of the time, although they do sometimes post a synopsis there, but most of the time, if it's going through GSA or an agency contract, you're never going to see that opportunity on FedBizOps because that's not public opportunity for people to bid on. So I won't say all the time because, as I said, they do sometimes say post a synopsis to FBO, but they say this is only for GSA contract holders. What the other thing you don't see is all the credit card transactions that take place because over $25,000 they post it to FedBizOps. So what happens to all the other stuff under $25,000? Well, typically, if it's over the micro purchase threshold of $3,000, the agencies just go out and get 3 bids. So again, as Steve mentioned, knowing specifically which agencies are buying what you sell and knowing who within those agencies buy what you sell, and also who are the end users that create the demand behind what the agencies are buying are good people to know. So that if I knew that you were out there and you had a product and I have a purchase card, I could just go directly and buy that from you. If the acquisition's between $3,000 and $25,000 and I know you're out there, you might be one of the 3 that I get a quote from. But that's also important on GSA schedules to understand too, because there are certain acquisition thresholds where all the contracting officer has to do is survey 3 vendors and then document their file and make a decision. So then you ask the question, how do I become one of those 3 vendors? And so that's sometimes where that good old-fashioned marketing and the relationship building comes in, so they know about you. And oftentimes, if you make that connection with them and they know you're out there, they say, hey, they've reached out to me. I'm going to look to them and see if they can provide us a quote on this. But the other thing I wanted to say about FedBizOps is it does make for a good market research tool as well, because you can go back 365 days and see if there was any solicitations that were posted on there. Oftentimes, too, if you happen to see a solicitation ID number, and if you just Google that solicitation, it's actually easier to Google the solicitation ID rather than to go to the FedBizOps keyword tool and post that in there. So if you Google the solicitation ID, oftentimes you can find the archived version of that solicitation. So if it's something that you want to bid on in the future and you can find the previous solicitation and read through that, then you can get some good information about what are they looking for in the scope, what are their evaluation criteria for award. So the next time that comes open for a recompete, you really are well prepared to do that. Also, Federal Procurement Data System is another historical spend database that you can go to. And this is actually the database when a contracting officer reports data on their contracting activities to the federal government. This is the database that it goes into. Now, USA Spending pulls from FPDS and a few other sources. I actually like USA Spending more than FPDS because it's a little bit more user-friendly and it has some various ways you can query. So I do like that. But FPDS is another database that you can use to get more information about a particular contract. In fact, if you were happen to looking for additional information, if you had that contract number and you went to FPDS and you look at that little, it's like a little Google search box there, type that, paste that contract number in there, it'll bring you up information about that particular contract, and oftentimes you can go into this little link that says view, and you can see information such as the base and all options value of the contract. Perhaps you can see who the modified user is, which is typically the contracting officer, how it was competed, how many offers there were on this. So a lot of good information you can get from that. Also, acquisition.gov and as well as this GSA has small business forecast. So you can go there and look to see what the agencies might be looking to procure in the upcoming future. I will tell you that some agencies are better than others. The agency that I worked for, the VA, unfortunately they didn't have a great procurement forecast, so if you happen to go and find the VA's procurement forecast, it's not all that great, but I know the GSA does a pretty good job in their small business forecasting, and I know even here within the Arctic region, if you go Google GSA Arctic region, they oftentimes post their forecast and it tells you who the contracting officer is going to be, how they want to set that aside or how they may be looking to set that aside, and in what quarter of the fiscal year will they be looking to do that. Yes, question?
We have a question from online. Do you start out with cold call introductions to the CO, and does that work?
Cold call introductions can be helpful to just, as I said, if you know that there's a CO that buys what you sell and you want to call them up and you have your capability statement ready to go and you say, hey, my name is Joe Smith from Acme Corporation, and I noticed that you do some buying within the GSA schedules, or of this particular product that I sell. Would you mind if I send you over a capability statement? And because I know that a lot of times you guys can just get three quotes and then move on from there. Our hope is that we can be one of the 3 people that you get a quote from. So I do think that could be helpful. I'd say be careful about doing the mass email distribution list because there are laws regarding spam. Nobody really likes to get spam, so just be careful about that in particular. But the other person that you might want to cold call, if you can find them, and this is the more challenging one, is not just the contracting officer, but that end user that is the contracting officer's customer that they're getting the product for. Because if you can get your company literature or information to them, typically what they do is they say, hey, contracting officer, I want to buy this, and by the way, I have a quote with some pricing information. So the contracting officer gets that, and they say, okay, well, we do need to get competition, so I'm going to get 2 other quotes, but hey, they've already got 1 quote. So that's another good way that you can be one of the 3 in those scenarios that gets the opportunity. This is an example of some of the things that you can do from the database. You can export some of the spend data. If you're good at Excel, you can break it out and kind of rank. You can see other vendors that are actually out there, potential competitors or potential partners, how much money they've been awarded, over how many transactions. You can even break it down by fiscal year. You can break it down by agency. So it's a very helpful tool to do that. If you needed some assistance, feel free to work with your local GCAP counselor and see if they can help you work through and find some of that data. But USA Spending is a public database, so you can actually go there, play around with it. You can go to the main Google-like search box, do a keyword search. You can put a competitor's name in there. Right under the big search box, there's a little link that says Prime Award Advanced Search feature. You can go to that and say, like, I want to look at contracts in this NAICS code within the fiscal year 2012 or 2014 that were competed in Oregon, and you can take a look at all of that information right there. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Steve, and Hill's going to talk about the rest of the, the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey used to say.
Good day. All right. Now we're going to start getting into the meat and potatoes. Everything has been somewhat preliminary up to this particular point, just to kind of tell you the things that you need to do, some general steps. Now we want to really talk about, really in my mind, what's essential. My background in the private industry for 30 years was sales, marketing, and business development. And I've worked for small companies, I worked for large companies. And so when I talk about sales and marketing plans being essential, I'm not doing that based on reading some book about what helps you in GSA and what doesn't. It's what has helped me be successful, and I've owned my own companies. So I just can tell you from my experience that without a plan, I didn't know where I was going, and more importantly, I didn't know when I got there that I actually completed what I wanted to do in the first place. So that being said, how is it essential? Because if you do the research and you don't know who is going to buy your products and services, how do you know who to sell to? How do you know how you're going to make a difference? You sell toilet paper. 500 other vendors on GSA sell toilet paper. How are you going to sell your toilet paper? Is it just in your head? Have you done any research to determine that you're got 4-ply versus 2-ply? That you could deliver 20 days earlier than all the other competition does? How do you know what you're going to emphasize to the federal buyer and or specifier if you don't know how you're different from your competition within GSA? And if you, the owner, know it, but your salespeople don't know it, what good does that do you? If you have a plan and you have a team that's selling within GSA, whether that team is one person or representatives or distributors or what have you, they don't know what you know unless it's in writing. Who does it better than we do? That's a comparison. How will we get new opportunities? Where's that in writing? Oh, I'm going to look it up in this particular website, on this research website. And then months and months go by, and then you find out somebody in your department went and looked at the same thing. Why? Because you didn't assign certain responsibilities of that sales and marketing plan to your company. What if you're a one-man show? Well, then you didn't assign it to yourself. Hopefully you're not repeating things that you've already done before. Short and long-term goals. If you haven't heard the word patience when it comes to selling to the government, then you probably haven't been selling to the government very long. So if you don't put together short and long-term goals with an expectation that, let's just say, for instance, my short-term goal is to introduce my company's products and services to 10 agencies. That's a short-term goal. May not have $1 worth of sale, but that's very important. And why did you determine those 10 agencies? My presumption is you did the research, you knew that that was important, that you introduce yourself. You also knew that in your product cycle, education came before sales. And if your product is a better mousetrap, well, then you know that education is essential. Okay, did you do those steps of educating your customer one after another in the right way with the right people? And does your company know that you did it, or the people that are responsible within your company to do it have done it, and they've reported to you that it's been complete? Sure. Absolutely. Yes, and there's no question about that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that your marketing in and of itself is going to be more important than your ultimate price. If you're selling toilet paper, trust me, it's going to be price. But if you're selling services, price will be important, but your experience, your capabilities, your input, perhaps pre-proposal, is essential. And have you got a plan to be able to provide inputs prior to a proposal coming out, whether it's within GSA or not? In other words, do you have an ability to influence a spec legally, ethically, but have the ability to provide that kind of input? Are you talking to the specifiers before that request for quote or proposal hits the street? That's a great question. And you should say that in your plan. I passed out to everybody online a sample sales and marketing plan for products. We've also got a sample sales and marketing plan for services. And if any of you would like to see that, just let me know by an email or show of hands online, and we will email that out to you. And again, it's just a sample. The products one is very, very, very basic, but it has some very important steps in there. And we would be happy at GCAP to help you put a plan together and then help you follow those steps going forward. How do you communicate with your customers? Well, you've got customer service, you have your sales department, you have distribution partners perhaps in some place. They all put together their information to help you put together the sales and marketing plan. You then determine your strategic direction. You look at your marketing analytics, which is your research, etc. You put that together with a marketing plan, and then you're out there marketing your capabilities to your customers. I've got a list of various ways to do that: email, website, seminars, direct marketing, so on and so forth. Just an example of the different ways that you can get your information out to your federal customers. I'm not saying that every one of those is going to work for your product or your service, but some of these just might. And the experience that you have is going to determine whether or not you'll stay with one. For instance, let's just pick one. Let's just say trade shows. Trade shows might work great for your company. They may do absolutely nothing for Williams' company. We'll go back to what you were saying about pricing. Let's just say it's a very, very, very basic commodity product. Really? Do you want to go to a trade show to talk about commodity product? Probably not. If you've got a better mousetrap, probably do. If you're a service company, you probably do, because you're going to meet some people there that are going to be very important to you. The question is, have you tried a trade show? Have you spoken to GCAP? Have you spoken to your PCO? Have you asked whether or not trade shows might be pertinent to you? It's all part of putting that plan together. Bless you. Okay, let's get into some nitty-gritty stuff. Now, these are just so-called tactics, ideas, actions that similar companies to yours have used over the years to some very, very successfully, some not so successfully, but some of these are very basic, and I'll start out with those. Are you displaying your GSA logo and contract number on your website? Are you? Hands? Only half. Do you have a specific link on your website to what you sell to the federal government or state government, etc.? By hands. Less than half of the people that raised their hands before. Do you print that on your letterhead and business cards? On the back of your business card, do you put the schedule that you're on and the SIN number you're on? Talked about linking. Have you created and distributed a capability statement? Is that capability statement printed on your website? Do you create, distribute, and update your price list? Gee, who would I send that to? I'm thinking maybe that federal contracting officers database that you've all started putting together here fairly recently. If they're buying what you're selling, and I take what Carol said with absolute total agreement, some contracting officers are open to that information if you provide it occasionally. If you bombard them with information, you will be off their list in no time. Trust me. And why I like you putting your database together, and preferably that database is coming from federal contracting officers that you quoted to, or more importantly, that you've gotten the contract from. You are less likely to, excuse the expression, piss them off if you're sending them updates on your pricing, or if you put new items on your GSA contract list. They're more likely to look at that and not round file it within 12.6 seconds. And again, it's a touchy-feely situation. I'm not going to tell you that every contracting officer is going to love to hear from you. But by all means, don't use mass emails. Don't send them out to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's out there. That's just not the way to go. Preferably work with the contracting officers that you've already done work with before, and then kind of expand it from there. Certainly when you've gotten your GSA contract, I hope you've gone out to every federal and even state agency that you've worked with before to let them know that you're on your GSA contract. For federal, that's a no-brainer because any federal agency can use that GSA contract to procure products and services. State agencies, there's a couple of contracts, Emergency Responder 84, Schedule 84, and the IT Schedule 70, where state agencies have the ability to buy off that schedule at any time, 365 a year. All the other schedules are available, basically all the other schedules are available if a state of emergency is declared in your state by the federal government. Yes, sir.
If you find a product to stay on FBO, the contract that's out there for your product that you have listed on your GSA, can you convince them, or do they have the option to cancel that solicitation and go directly to GSA, or once they start down the path, they have to continue that path?
Carol, I think I'd ask you that. I'm not sure they can cancel it. I'm not sure there'd be a reason why they would do that if it's been published. What's been your experience on that?
Well, there's optional GSA schedules and there's mandatory ones. So, if you saw something that was on a mandatory GSA schedule, but it went to FBO, then if somebody contacted the contracting officer and said, hey, this is a mistake, these are mandatory schedules, that they would probably say, and if you made them say, hey, we had this on schedule, so why are you not buying it? That could be a situation where they would go back.
Make a change. Yeah.
If they went out to FBO without going through a GSA schedule, perhaps it's something that they could have maybe missed, that they didn't see that there was this option on the GSA schedules. But they also, in those optional schedules, maybe for some reason they thought that they could maybe get better pricing or terms or delivery or something by opening it up outside of the GSA schedules as well. So each contracting officer is different in their mindset and their decision-making process. So that's why you're going to find probably a pretty wide variance in the way those things happen.
And another key, we find too, is to look for early opportunities, RFIs, requests for information, where you have that opportunity to say, hey, why don't you do it easy? Sometimes it wasn't there. Once it's out, I agree, it's tough for them to already down the path.
I think that, like in general, if a lot of people are coming up with a new schedule or adding products, say there's a product that's an annual purchase for a certain contracting officer. If they've been doing it for 5 or 10 years and they realize that it's never been on GSA, they may just kind of skip that step intentionally or maybe not. But now that this product is being offered there, that's kind of, I guess it goes back to your marketing.
Well, that's part of your marketing. Again, just mentioned the last item on there is alert your federal customers that you have a GSA contract. Let them know that your product is available on GSA. 20 million different products. Some are on there, some are dropping off, some are being added on. So it's to your advantage, obviously, no pun intended, that you're out there letting your customers, especially ones you've done business with, and I would say especially if they've been doing it on open, RFQ or RFP basis, that they can obtain this on GSA. Why do you do that? Because you're eliminating competition. And as long as that, depending on the procurement dollar amount, as long as there can be competition within GSA to allow the value process to continue for the contracting officer to make that determination, then that's to your advantage.
Yeah, that's another good point. Competition. Typically, they always want to get 2 or more quotes to have competition. So if you're the only person that sells this widget on GSA, they may bring it outside into the open market just to get competition.
Is there a dollar threshold for that?
Well, the competition threshold is over the micro purchase threshold.
Right.
So.
Yeah, again, we're making a lot of presumptions on this. We're presuming that you all have contracts. We're presuming you did the research. We're presuming that you understand that the government is buying what you're selling on GSA. Again, this isn't the intro to GSA class, et cetera. So the presumption is that if you're on there, you made the determination along with GSA, and I say along with GSA because the presumption is you did the readiness assessment toolbox, you presented it to GSA to give them confidence that the product or service that you're providing is being bought by their customer base on GSA. So if you move someone who's been putting it on open market, so to speak, and now wants to move it in GSA, that should be a win-win for you. Because if you're on there, the presumption is that you put a pretty competitive price in there and you have a competitive and quality product. So by all means, if you're seeing product or services that you provide on GSA on open market, that would be a target market segment for you to go after. Let's just say it's the Department of Justice and they're always doing an open market, but it's on the GSA. I would be looking to help educate Department of Justice that they can buy those products and services on GSA. Don't presume that every contracting officer and every agency knows that your product or service is on GSA. Especially with the recent turnover of Vietnam-era contracting officers to now, I call it the 20s and 30 generation contracting officers, no disrespect at all, but they do not have the years of experience that these contracting officers that kind of started off with GSA, literally 30 years ago, have. So the expectation that they all know what's on there, well, that's just not true. So you have to be part of the education process for the contracting officers. Think local first, then national. 9 times out of 10, this is the way you need to go. And when I say 9 times out of 10, if you are a national distributor and you do $50 million a year in sales, then you can think nationally right away. But if you're a small business, especially if you're service, but even if you're products, you should be looking at your local target market customers first. I assume you do not have $1 million sales and marketing budget every single year. I assume that you can't send people all over the states to every different command or location or base or what have you for your products. Let's just say you're selling to the Forest Service. If you can't sell to the Forest Service in Oregon, what in the hay do you think you're going to sell them in Alabama? If you're not competitive, if you don't provide the right product at the right price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you can't sell locally, why should you have spent time and effort to try to sell nationally? Now, there's exceptions to this, guys, again. Depends on your product and service. But as I say, 9 times out of 10, working with companies here in Oregon, I'm amazed at how often that they are actually traveling outside of the state of Oregon to agencies that are doing business here in Oregon, and they haven't even spoken to the Oregon ones. I had a company just the other day was telling me that they were very excited because they were going to the San Jose VA. And I said, well, have you been to Roseburg? Have you been to Portland? Oh, no. But the first places they're going is out of the state. Now, remember, CEOs do generally try to buy locally where it makes sense financially. So they have at least an indirect desire to want to buy locally where it makes sense. Okay? Yep.
I think one more comment. You mentioned earlier to make sure your DSPS profile is up to date. Also, make sure your GSA number, your GSA schedule is on that profile, because when those contracting officers, like Steve said, when I was a contracting officer, that's the first thing I would do is say, who within the state of Oregon sells this product, and I'd go to the DSPS website and I get a list of firms, and then from there you can click into their profiles, and then you can see specifically which ones have GSAs built.
Great point. Carol's saying that make sure in your SAM and in your dynamic small business profile that you have your GSA contract number. Absolutely. And I would recommend you put your schedule in there and your SIN and give a description of that schedule and SIN. Don't assume that the contractor officer knows that Schedule 84 is first responder. Don't assume that, or IT 70 or whatever the case might be. I don't know if everyone who sells product is aware or services that if you have a GSA FSS contract, you are eligible to also be on DOD's EMAL. By show of hands, how many people know what DOD's EMAL is? Again, I would say about half. We're pretty consistent here as far as these numbers are concerned. DOD is a entity in and of itself. Sometimes they really love to buy off of GSA. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the Navy does. Sometimes the Army doesn't. I think a different commander gets in and they want to make a statement, and they don't think GSA is necessarily in and of itself the most efficient way to do, and they'll tell their people to buy off DOD EMAL. The irony of that, of course, is everything that's on DOD EMAL is basically the same pricing and products and services that are on GSA. In other words, DOD EMAL is kind of a mini GSA in a way. Not all the products and services that are on GSA are on DOD EMAL, but basically you can get on DOD EMAL and it's an administrative process. And for anyone that's interested in that, just give me a call or send me an email after this and I will talk to you on how to do that. All that's doing is just increasing your visibility to your customer base, and it's administrative. You don't have to put a proposal together and negotiate pricing and so on and so forth. Basically, they agree with the pricing and the terms and conditions that you put on GSA.
But it says a lot of things that GSA doesn't necessarily want to say. So there's been a lot of debate. I don't know if it ever got worked out.
Robert's saying that, again, like every single one of these things with GSA, that process is evolving, and there may be some changes on that. So again, great point, Robert, and I will, or GCAP will assist you in ensuring that that can happen, or if it's temporarily on hold, we'll let you know that it's temporarily on hold. There is an annual conference that GSA puts on called GSA Expo that unfortunately for the last 2 years, maybe 3, due to the GSA scandal you may have read about in Las Vegas, unfortunately has not been held the last couple of years, and it's a wonderful place, and I would talk about that, and I may even have mentioned that in my sales and marketing tactic. It can make great sense to go to that trade show, but my point of bringing it up is that's where I got a lot of my information about DoD EMOL and how to sell and market GSA contracts is at this expo, because you will see literally hundreds of GSA employees, and more importantly, you will see even more of their customers, contracting officers going to that, because it's where they get trained on how to use GSA e-commerce's site. So if that shows up in Florida, I think it will be the next time. If that truly happens, I'll let you guys know about that, but I wouldn't hold your breath on it, let's put it that way. Attend every government-centric small business conference and or networking event in your area to determine long-term the best ones for your firm. Some are really good, some aren't very good, but if you haven't gone to them yourselves, or a peer company or a company that you respect, maybe it's in your industry, hasn't gone, or maybe has gone and said, it was the worst thing since whatever, go to it. They're put together by the agencies in some cases. They're put together by companies like organizations like PNDC, GCAP, etc. Why? Specifically to help educate you, train you, and in some cases introduce you to the decision makers in buying. Just yesterday I was at the VA in Roseburg. I don't know, again, we don't have any VA FSS contracts here, I don't think, but the point is that I didn't know this, but the VA actually has a contract with a private company to put on mini trade fairs at every VA location across the country, and specifically for VA FSS contract holders. So I was just down in Roseburg, and there was it was a small room, so they put in as many companies as they could. There was about 25 companies in there, and I'm sitting there, and in 1 hour there's like 30 or 40 nurses and doctors and technicians coming in here, all looking at all these GSA or GSA VA FSS contract holders and their products. Cool. Now, it was $695 a table, but if you're selling hospital beds, I think you could probably make that up in a pretty quick period of time. Did you know that the Defense Logistics Agency puts on trade fairs at their locations in Richmond, Tracy, Philadelphia on an annual basis? These are things that if you are not taking advantage of them, or at least attending them, even if you don't want to spend the money, let's just say if you have to spend some money on some of these, most of them are free, but some of them have a fee, go to them. Walk it. Yes?
We have a question from online. Is there a schedule or a posting for those events? Where can people find them?
That's the $64,000 question. There is not one single location. I've never found it. That goes to the research thing I talked about. If you are, you might see it on eLibrary occasionally, not a whole lot. I would be working with SBA. I'd be working with GCAP, maybe even PNDC. I would, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. Matter of fact, we'll probably get that to a second, but I want to talk about Jim Revere here for a second. You could probably even get some of that information from your own trade associations, which we're going to talk a little about. You'd be amazed how much information you can get from your trade association, assuming that you do have one, about how to sell to the government and where the government is up there putting small business conferences, et cetera, together to assist you. So we're down to about 15 minutes here, so we're going to, again, we're not finishing at 10:30. We're going to have plenty of questions. We're not going to end this. but I want to switch this over to Jim Rivera, who's going to talk about teaming arrangements, but not quite on this slide. Give me one more, Jim, and I'll bring you into this. Carol, you had a question?
I was just going to say regarding the finding those events, every agency has a small business liaison, and connect with them, ask them, if they have distribution lists, are they on Facebook or other social media? You'd be surprised how many agencies are on Facebook. But connect with them in their various communication outlets so that you can get word of when they are having these events.
Great point. And the Office of Small Business Utilization also publishes this. And we're going to get into that. The person asked that question, we're going to actually give you some more answers to that question as we go along here. So bear with us. I talked about running sales on GSA Advantage. Contact your PCO and ask him how you can do that. It's a little bit of a process, but maybe it's getting towards the end of the year, either the end of the government fiscal year or your fiscal year. You got some inventory in there. You want to blow something out. Government loves to see deals. Bookmark and utilize the GSA Interact website. I referenced this thing before. If you're not looking at GSA Interact, you're not training or updating yourself on what's happening within GSA. It's actually, I think, the most dynamic part of GSA. I think they've got most of the millennial generation that's at GSA is working on the Interact because they really seem to be keeping things hopping in that area. It says it's open collaborative community for connecting and communicating about GSA, so I recommend it. Advertise in GSA's Market Tips magazine. Well, that may be old. I'm not sure Market Tips magazine is even still around yet. They were at the last GSA Expo, but I think it may have gone away. But there are command magazines. There are base magazines and newsletters. You can advertise in all of these. So, for instance, again, let's just say you wanted to sell to VA Roseburg, and they've got a newsletter. You might be surprised. They sell advertising space at that. Or maybe it's, the Coast Guard station up here on near the Coos Bay area. Maybe they've got a newsletter. Maybe they've got a magazine that they publish. That's absolutely a place where print advertising makes sense for your product or service. I'm not saying it does for everybody. And again, I want to reiterate, not every single one of these ideas works for every product or service out here. But this is just sort of an accumulation of different ideas that have been successful for other firms. But advertising works. Believe it or not, people actually do read magazines still. Not very often, but they do. And now the most important thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to then have James talk here for a minute, is in my 14 years of working with GSA contracts, if there is one thing that has always highlighted a successful GSA vendor, is the dedication of a minimum of one person to government sales. If you cannot do that, I'm not saying you're not going to be successful. I'm up here to educate you on the kinds of common processes, procedures, etc., of the companies that do well. And I can just sit here and honestly tell you, I don't know of anyone except for one company that I can think of that did well without having a dedicated person, minimum a dedicated person. Certainly it's great if you can have 2 or 3. And by the way, that administrative or that dedicated person, please don't tell me it's your administrative person that's maintaining all the records for your IFF. That's not the person I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone that is part of the sales and marketing plan and is taking steps and reporting to management or ownership the things that they're doing specifically so they start determining what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So that by the time you've been in this 2 years, 3 years, you got a plan. You know what's going to work for you successfully. Or I'll say this on the other return. You've tried everything in 3 years and it doesn't work. Guess what? GSA ain't good for you. Gee, that's a surprise because 60% of all GSA firms do not $1 of sales. Not $1. 19,000 firms, 60% of them didn't do $1 worth of sales. 40% of the firms do $50 billion a year. Of those 40%, I mean, I don't even want to get into this number, but I mean, of that 40%, literally half of those do 80% of the business. It isn't just because they're all low priced, although a lot of them are. But I mean, that's just the reality. But a lot of them are very dynamic down here in time. Yeah, exactly. And if you're not even doing $25,000 a year in sales, why are you using it? It can't be much of a tool for you. I mean, you need to say to yourself, when you got the GSA, I'm making so many assumptions here because this isn't the third series of classes here. The assumption is you've done your research. There is a market for your product and services out there. The government is buying it. So why aren't you getting your share? What I'm trying to say is there are ways for you to get your share, but there's not a direct line. It may be experimentation, etc. Contact strategy is very we've already kind of talked a little bit about that. What to ask? Do you have the authority to purchase in your office? If yes, do you buy? If no, what does the majority of who does the majority of your purchasing? May I have the contact information? When you are talking to a contracting officer, if you are talking to a specifier, please tell me and then tell them that you've done your research and you know that they buy what you sell. If you contact them and say, hey, gee, do you buy paint? Do you buy light bulbs? And because you're a paint supplier or bulb, they're turned off. There is that you have made an enemy. You will not be talking to that person in the future. So if you can call up someone because you know that particular person has bought, let's just say, light bulbs in the past, and say, I did my research. I did understand that you buy about $1 million worth of light bulbs each year, and I'd just like to put my name in the hopper, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to appreciate the fact that they know, that you know, that they buy what you sell. Finding new customers, cold calling. We talked about authority to purchase, contact information, doing follow-ups. Emails is follow-up only. You notice the big asterisk there. I am not a proponent or a supporter of mass emails. I don't know anyone that has done well on that. Maybe they're out there, but I don't know anyone that's done that. That's why I like having your own database of people that you talk to. Conference attendance, set goals. Anticipate your potential partners, not just the buyers. Look at it at what you can do to get your message out to the different federal agencies that are out there. Network, network, and network. If you're not talking to your peers with GSA contracts, again, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're all in the same boat. It doesn't mean you're all competitors, but you're all in the same boat. Some things work, some things don't. Share that information. You'd be surprised at how much more information you'll get back from them. Just very quickly, these are some councils and groups that if you don't know about them, look them up. Let me give you an example. The Professional Service Council. That's actually the organization of government service providers, and they're there for no other reason than to improve communication between service providers and government buyers that buy services. I mean, volunteer, be a part of that council. In many cases, you can actually be a part of that. The Industry Government Council, same thing. They're there to facilitate industry's communications excuse me, with GSA. Put yourself out there. Be a part of this if you can do it. If you're more than just a one-man show, put yourself out there. The NCMA, we've talked about that, professional organizations such as PNDC, GCAP, etc. It is an ongoing process. There are going to be a lot of different people that you can contact, but trust me, you're going to know sooner than later which ones are going to help you and which ones aren't. Is that a good? Again, good to hear that, Robert. All right, I'm going to turn this over to James Rivera. He's going to talk a little bit about partnerships and teaming arrangements within GSA.
Thank you, Steve. I just wanted to bring up teaming because it is such a powerful tool that enable you to reach further, and it should be definitely a part of your business development, marketing, and sales plan. It is, we don't have time to go into the specifics of each one of these, and they do have certain requirements, and it depends on the opportunity. Particular to GSA is the contract teaming arrangement where both members have to be GSA holders, and they have specifics, but if you come and talk to me at GCAP or any of the GCAP members, we can explain the differences to you and how they can benefit you in any given opportunity, both on GSA and regular federal opportunities. They can be extremely advantageous to you. It can help you grow in capacity and market share. When you see an opportunity and you think, oh, well, I can only do half of this or 60% of this, it's through teaming arrangements that allow you to take advantage of that opportunity, but you've got to make sure that the teaming arrangement is allowed, it's the most advantageous for you and your partner, and also that you cover yourself, that teaming agreement and others protect you and you understand exactly what each one of you is getting into. I wish we had time to really go section by section here, but it is just, I can't express it enough that you need to look at that, you really need to consider that, you really need to make it part of your plan because it can help you grow and reach areas that would normally take a long time or you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. As some of these opportunities that come out are multi-disciplined, this is what allows you to get there. But be careful, there's specifics from the agency and there's specifics that you want to do when you write up that arrangement and make that arrangement to protect both of you. Thank you.
And again, I want to emphasize that most teaming arrangements, probably about 98% of them, are going to be for services. And you might be really surprised at how a teaming relationship can expand your list of capabilities to provide to the government. And if you've got any questions on that, we've got James's contact information in there, and I highly recommend that you contact him. Again, now you're basically just going to give a listing of places that you can find additional information, and I talked about the Office of Small Business Utilization. I recommend checking these particular sites to, again, get information. The question was asked on, gee, when is there a small business conference? Where are they going to be located, et cetera? OSBU and OSDBU, which is Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Yeah, we love the government. They've just got so many of these little groups. You would think they could have combined those two, but whatever. But the point being is there are numerous ones, and I would recommend that if you're not sure for your company which conference or conferences are going to be good, call GCAP or call PNDC, and we'll be happy to tell you what our experience has been for small businesses in the local area. And the presumption is none of you that are online or in here today are from the East Coast, so we think we can probably help you out on where the small business conferences are out here. Opportunities for small business. Very important to point out that every one of the contracting officers that do use GSA do have their own small business goals. GSA's FSS schedules is, if you ask a contracting officer, will tell you is one of the primary ways to help them meet their small business goals. And in fact, a number of SINs are actually dedicated specifically to small business categories, such as 8A or woman-owned or HUBZone or so on and so forth. So if you do have a small business certification, whether it be women-owned, service disabled, etc., you might find it very much to your advantage to take a look at which one of those schedules and SINs have some primary focus towards those small business certifications. Large businesses have subcontracting plans, so they are looking for small business suppliers to help them meet their goals. GSA has a forecast of small business opportunities, and I would always recommend that you check that website out. Subcontractor work to prime contractors, again, whether that's within GSA or outside of GSA, is always an excellent way to increase your government work. In fact, most companies that I've ever worked with over the last 14 years, they got their start as a subcontractor before they became a prime contractor to the federal government. And this is just another list of subcontracting opportunity locations, so please check these out and make sure that they work for you, or they don't. If they don't, that's fine. It's part of your plan. You've checked them out. They work or they don't, but check them all out. Additional procurement opportunities, and Carol has touched base on some of these. Federal Acquisition Jump Station is a good place to find out where some federal opportunities are being printed and provided. GCAP, we have a bid matching service, which is excellent for outside of GSA, so it gives you an opportunity to find out where opportunities are both local and nationally, so be aware of that. This is just a listing of all your GCAP people here that are in the state of Oregon. We need to wrap this up, and I am just so darn proud to say within 2 minutes of our deadline. Again, if to any of you that this has seemed a little bit disjointed, I apologize again. We had to do this in a limited time frame. But if we've done nothing more than giving you kind of a general education on how to be more effective in selling your products and plans, then we've been successful on that. But I would hope that if you felt that any of this was important to you, but you want to know more, that you take the opportunity to reach out to Carol, to James, myself, to Carly, Suzanne within PNDC. Reach out, ask us specific questions. We're here for no other reason except to bring federal dollars back into the state of Oregon, the state of Washington, or what have you. We don't have any other vested interests. If we're not helping you, we're not doing our jobs. So please use us. That's what we're there for. And some additional websites, again, you all have access to this. And again, would like to thank GSA. I work closely with the GSA people in this area. They've always been extremely supportive of GCAPS and PTAC efforts nationwide to promote the GSA federal supply schedules. And on our next class, I'm actually thinking I might be able to get our program manager, our local program manager, Kenya Taylor, out here for our next class. So this is the time. We're pretty much wrapped up. If you have any questions for any of the 5 of us that are here, we'd be more than happy to answer those questions. If you're not really comfortable asking those questions here because you may feel there's a competitor, again, you know how to reach out and talk to us. So thank you very much for your attendance. Questions?
The only comment I have that I would share more than a question is if you go professional services contracts, you know about these making some changes. So if you have levels for engineering, it's now eventually going to be called professional services contract. That will be happening. And on those CAB reviews, we do a lot of them remotely, but they are much more enhanced. So it almost feels like an audit. They're not being as nice as they want to be.
So Robert was telling us that the audits, your annual audits, are getting a little bit tougher. They're going to be asking a little bit more specific questions. I always tell people don't panic about that, but obviously be prepared. Make sure that you're keeping very accurate records of your sales to the government. Secondarily, I alluded to it a little bit before, and as Robert just said, there are definitely some fairly significant changes coming down the pike on professional services schedules. Don't be a fear to that. It's just a way that the government is saying that there are issues, there are ways that they can support their customers better. To give you an example, on all of the service schedules that are out there with all the let's just say that 10,000 of the 19,000 GSA vendors are service providers. There's over 40,000 different labor categories out there. That has become somewhat confusing to GSA's client base. So one of the things they're looking at is trying to, quote unquote, standardize some of these labor categories. I digress on what they're doing, but the point is that there are some changes coming down the pike, so be prepared to see that. As Robert taught, in some cases you're going to be an email on here very shortly, but hopefully they're going to be all good changes. Hopefully. Any other questions? Yes.
So specifically within marketing, there was on one of the slides you had merchandising promotions. Who can you legally target with merchandising promotions within the government?
That's really a good question. You got an answer on that one? I can give you a partial answer. Okay. The question was about merchandising options. Well, I'll give you an example of GSA Expo. It's not a very good one, but people were able to give out samples on some of their products. Again, I'm not sure this is exactly how you see merchandising, but in this particular case, at some of the trade shows you can give out examples or samples of your products up to a certain dollar value to allow them to see what it is, touch it, feel it, so on and so forth. In some cases, on some of the trade fairs, you might have an ability to go out and demonstrate and educate them on how your product works, compare it, bring out an example, etc. Maybe you might give me an example of what you're thinking from your industry, how that would be, what that would look like. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the only thing at GSA Expo, I'll give you an example. There was a vendor who was giving out, I'm a golfer, so I'm a little prejudiced, but they were giving out sleeves of Pro V1 golf balls, which I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Well, they got in trouble because the dollar value on it was over whatever it was, I don't know, $15. Yeah, and so they got in trouble on it, but I did get my sleeve of golf balls. So again, there are some restrictions on it. I would say, again, depending on what trade fair and or conference you were at, I would talk to us or like PNDC who is putting on and see what limits, if any, might be there. But I don't know of really any agencies that have ever put anything out saying you can't do this or you can't do that from a sample standpoint. Have you? Yeah, just the value thing, if you're giving it to them as a merchandising promotion or whatever. I mean, if you're going to say you can buy two, get one free, I don't ever see that, you know, on the government side. Robert, anything on that side? Yeah. Yeah.
Per agency per year or something.
If you guys were doing seed or fertilizer, I mean, you could give, you know, small packets or something like that, I guess. I mean, yeah. Yeah, 3M was going to be here today, but unfortunately, yes. Yes.
It was brought to our attention from a contracting officer that's trying to purchase our type of products off the GSA that in our industry it's impossible to list everything. And they mentioned that they had seen, I believe she called it an outsourcing modification, where if you list product X, you can also sell product X plus one because it's similar to what you have listed on your schedule.
As an open market item within GSA?
No, through GSA, so they could hear it through GSA.
Well,
no, like fertilizer. So like it's impossible to list all fertilizer. You have a 1616,
right.
15.
Is there a different price for 1515?
Potentially, but even if it was the same price, when you talk about that the camp visit,
Right,
audit,
right.
It's to the GSA, it's a completely different product.
What a big thing on this calendar is that lately, and again, I do, our company helps people schedule some work with the office in DC, but so all throughout the country. So we run into this a lot, but focusing on marking things as open market. And they're very specific on this needs to be open market, that's not understood. And as long as it is, they were happy.
Yeah, I mean,
If it's not, then it was, the concern for them was the agency would know it was non-scheduled type thing. And that was it. And this was just literally yesterday.
Now, were they purchasing other things like within the same contract that were on the schedule, or was it just that one?
It was certain things on schedule, and then it was like installation of fitness equipment.
yeah.
And it was not on that. They never wanted to go to market. And what they did on other items.
And that's what I meant by open market within GSA. It's not in the contract, but, and that's a great example, Robert, that, you know, maybe you're selling a system of some sort, but you haven't got you didn't put anything in there for installation within the SIN, you know, that was applicable installation. The contracting officer can negotiate with you to add that installation as an open market procurement within GSA.
They don't feel like shooting the system, making it seem like it's on schedule, then that's a little bit.
But
we've had a lot of people want to purchase things off of eBuy, and it's not so much an issue trying to convince the contracting officer it's on schedule.
right.
In preparation for the audit, so that you don't say, okay, well, yeah, I sold them this because they requested on eBuy and I gave them a price. I told them it was open market and all that. But if they only want to buy that particular product,
Right.
If 16 listed and they just want to buy 15,
Right.
and the needs change,
Yeah.
that's kind of what she was talking about. Is that every year our customers change their need for their particular product.
And so the auditor was having an issue, what, that it wasn't an IFF item?
It wasn't listed on our schedule. It was basically a variation of a product listed on.
And when you told them it was an open market item,
The contract from the government still shows our GSA number.
That was a problem.
Yeah.
The contract number shows they assume it's on schedule.
Yeah.
So one, you can't have the contract number show.
And that's how they want to do it. They
Interesting.
want to market that they procured through GSA.
They wanted the easy way.
Okay.
And then you get in trouble.
Well, it's okay if you get in trouble. As long as-
I was aware of that.
It's not just giving away.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, Steve, I'll
Yep.
make a comment that, as Steve mentioned earlier, you know, sometimes part of your role, I mean, there's a lot of new contracting officers that don't really know all of the rules there, and so taking time to educate them, saying, well, you know, if you're going to buy this open market from us, you know, we can certainly give that to you, but, you know, we, you know, have to follow this certain procedure. You know,
Yeah.
because, and sometimes that's helpful to them, to their knowledge, because sometimes you get a brand new contracting officer, and they just get thrown requisitions like, here, get this done. And they're like, okay.
I mean, I've taught these classes for so many years, and for everything that I say, there are so many exceptions that you literally could be up here spouting off for days and days and not be able to show all the exceptions to the rules per se. And with the newer contracting officers, we are seeing that quite a bit, to be quite honest with you. Again, yep, good point.
Well, this was very recent. Them trying to do that. I think they were just looking to make it legal so that it wasn't against any rules. But
Right.
They had mentioned this outsourcing modification that it used to be done more often and then it's kind of gone away. But
I haven't heard that phrase, outsourcing modification, before.
now we are. But it's like I said, you don't really know your customer's needs until the contract comes out.
Right. Well, again, I just want to reiterate to the people here and to those online, I know it sounds repetitious. I'm not getting senile, but I do it on a regular basis to ensure that the point sinks in. Because every company is different, because each application of your product or your service is usually different within the government. Please utilize this to assist you in putting your plans together, and if you don't want to do a plan, go ahead and just give us a call, and if you have an opportunity and then you want us to help you out with that, do not feel hesitant in giving us a call. We want you to be successful. If you're patient, we'll be patient with you and be more than happy to work out in any way we can to assist your efforts on GSA FSS. Trust me, there's not enough money coming through the GSA federal supply schedules in the state of Oregon in my considered opinion, for as many contracts as that are out there. So whatever we can do to help you out in that, we'd be more than happy to do that. So there are some things here on the table. I want to reiterate that I will send out a copy of a sample services sales and marketing plan. We will send it out. There are some other documents we will be sending out at the end to the people that are online. So.
Thank you very much, Steve, and thank you, GCAP. A couple last-minute things for us here. Evaluations, please fill them out. You know, we love feedback. There's that. Also, I wanted to just do a quick plug for PNDC. There are several PNDC members here today. Raise your hand. Raise the roof. There you go. A lot of folks here. Also, several folks online as well. If you don't know what PNDC, who PNDC is and what we do, come see me or come see Carly. We have a lot of great networking opportunities for you. Last off, thank you very much online. I will be sending a presentation. We have a recorded copy of this webinar that we will be sending for you as well. And then I will also send everybody's contact information should you want to contact Steve or anybody at GCAP. Other than that, I hope you have a great day and have a great weekend. Thank you for coming out.